so we're going to be reading Martin Heidegger's Metaphysics. These are taken from his lectures. Why are there beings at all instead of nothing? That is the question. Presumably, it is no arbitrary question. Why are there beings at all instead of nothing? This is obviously the first of all questions. Of course, it is not the first question in the chronological sense. Individuals, as well as people, ask many questions in the course of their historical passage through time. They explore, investigate, and test many sorts of things before they can run into question. Why are there beings at all instead of nothing? Many never run into this question at all. If running into the question means not only hearing and reading the interrogative sentence as uttered, but asking the question, that is, taking a stand on it, posing it, compelling oneself into the state of this questioning. And yet, we are each touched once, maybe even now and then, by the concealed power of this question, without properly grasping what is happening to us. In great despair, for example, when all weight tends to dwindle away from the things and the sense of things grow dark. The question looms. Perhaps it strikes only once, like the muffled tolling of a bell that resounds in the Dasein, and gradually fades away. The question is there in heartful joy, for then all things are transformed and surround us as if for the first time, as if it were easier to grasp that they were not, rather than that they are, and are as they are. The question is therein a spell of boredom, when we are equally distant from despair and joy, but when the stubborn and ordinariness of beings lay open a wasteland in which it makes no difference to us whether beings are or are not. And then, in a distinctive form, the question resonates once again. Why are there beings at all instead of nothing? But whether this question is asked explicitly, or whether it merely passes through our Dasein like a fleeting gust of wind, unrecognized as a question, whether it becomes more oppressive or is thrust away by us again, and suppressed under some pretext, it certainly is never the first question that we ask. But is it the first question in another sense, namely in rank? We will explain 3 ways in which this is so. The question, why are there beings at all instead of nothing? In the first rank, and for us as the broadest, as the deepest, and finally as the most ordinary question. The question is the broadest in scope. It comes to a halt at no being of any kind whatsoever. The question embraces all that is, and that means not only what is now present at hand in the broadest sense, but also what has previously been and what will be in the future. The domain of this question is limited only by what simply is not and never is. That's a really interesting way. Let's repeat that. So, the domain of this question is limited only by what simply is not and never is. By nothing, all that is not nothing comes into question, and in the end even nothing itself, not, as it were, because it is something, a being, for, after all, we are talking about it, but because it is nothing. Emphasis on is. The scope of our question is so broad that we can never exceed it. We are not interrogating this being or that being, nor all beings, each in turn. Instead, we are asking from the start about the whole of what is, or, as we say for reasons to be discussed later, beings as a whole and such. Fascinating. Just as it is the broadest question, the question is also the deepest. Why are there beings at all? So as a fun exercise while we read this, why do you think there are beings? I think if there is a creator, I think there would be beings, because if we are created in his image and humans like to create, I think that if there was a being that was capable of creating, it would want to manifest a creation. That would be my, if I was a student in his class, that's probably something I'd raise my hand and say. And we continue. Why, that is, what is the ground? From what ground do beings come? On what grounds do beings stand? To what grounds do beings go? The question does not ask this or that about beings, what they are in each case, here and there, how they are put together, how they can be changed, what they can be used for, and so on. The question seeks the ground for what is, insofar as it is in being. So being in a philosophical sense is something in and of and for itself. So there's the lowercase being and capital being. And so when you read philosophy, you have to keep that in mind. To seek the ground, this means to get to the bottom. Then there's the German word ergründen. I don't speak German, so forgive me if you do and I don't pronounce it right. What is put into question comes into retaliation with a ground. But because we are questioning, it remains an open question whether the ground is truly grounding, foundation affecting, ordinary ground, whether the ground refuses to provide a foundation and is so an abyss, or whether the ground is neither one nor the other, but merely offers the perhaps necessary illusion of a foundation and is thus an unground. However, this may be the question seeks a decision with respect to the ground that grounds the fact that what is in being as the being that it is. This why question does not seek causes for beings, causes which are of the same kind and drawn from the same level as beings themselves. This why question does not just skim the surface, but presses into the domains that lie at the ground, even pressing into the ultimate. To the limit, the question is turned away from all surface and shallowness, striving for depth as the broadest. It is at the same time the deepest of the deep questions.